We're going to have a discussion today with our friends from Ericsson about unlocking the potential in smart manufacturing with Industry 4.0 technology. First, I want to say let's keep this interactive. You can ask questions in the chat. And also, I want to thank the two Katies from Step Marketing for coordination today and putting on this webinar. All right, let me go to our next slide. This is what we're going to cover. Really going to give an overview on what's going on with advanced manufacturing or smart manufacturing and how customers are leveraging private 5G and other technologies like neutral hosts and so forth, and really overcoming the limitations of legacy networks. And what I like to say is it's not an either or versus Wi-Fi and 5G and wired networks. It's really a combination. It's a hybrid network that provides optimal connectivity depending on the service, the client, or the application, or whatever's needed in the environment. But it's really unlocking innovation and really the true prospects of what you can do with Industry 4.0. So we'll go through this, and it's going to be more. I'll moderate with our speakers, who I'll introduce here on the next slide. But it's a discussion, and please ask questions as we go. All right. With that, I want to introduce our speakers today. Esteemed colleagues, I've worked quite a bit. Eugene Banks from Ericsson, heads up emerging technologies and global partner sales and development. And also on the STEP team, Dan Gregory, who heads up our private cellular and really our mobility practice that we've built here at STEP. I do want to give you just a quick overview of STEP, who we are. We're a nationwide engineering services firm, really a next generation IT solution provider or managed service provider, if you will. And we combine really the conversation around hybrid networks for our customers. Where for us, a hybrid network is talking about 5G, private cellular, what these things are, combined with and integrated with traditional wired and Wi-Fi network. And you'll see the different vendor logos here on the screen. But all that has to be wrapped with security. And more our customers are looking to us for a flexible consumption model, certainly from a financing standpoint, but also from a managed services standpoint. And one of the things we've invested in heavily here at STEP, and I'll highlight that in a couple slides here, is after you deploy the hybrid network, how do you manage it? How do you get observability to it, visibility? How do you resolve any issues that arise? And really, it's the next generation of monitoring the networks after they're deployed. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but this is STEP at a glance. And one thing I do want to highlight as well, one of our differentiations, is we have these briefing centers and innovation labs, 3 of them, where you can come and explore what's possible and talk about the different technologies. We don't assume anything. We usually start with exploring with our customers when they come into the briefing center, what's going on in their network and any issues that they might have from a connectivity standpoint, but what are they trying to accomplish as well? What's on the horizon? What's Industry 4.0 mean to them? Digital transformation. You see some of the applications and use cases in the lower left here. And what we like to say is we're really plumbers. We're the next gen plumbers. We put in a hybrid network. We talk with our customers. We build a plan for success. And it's leveraging cellular technologies with the traditional networking technologies, and then security and managed services to really build out an optimal infrastructure to allow them to achieve what they need to achieve from the Industry 4.0. Manufacturing, far and away, is leading the charge on advanced applications, AI, robotics, computer vision, so forth, and we'll touch on some of these today. In our Indianapolis center, which I want to highlight, that's a 60,000 square foot smart manufacturing facility. We've partnered with ARI, it's in Indianapolis, and then we also partner with Connected Systems Institute Milwaukee on UWM's campus, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. It's all about advanced manufacturing. That actually is the Center for AI and Innovation in Manufacturing for Microsoft, and they're making a sizable investment in Southeast Wisconsin. And then in the upper picture here, that's actually our headquarters in Covington, Kentucky. Now, one of the things that after you put in a hybrid infrastructure, and this is one of the leading conversations that we're having, and certainly would love to, for everybody on this call that's participating today, we can do a demo, is how do you manage it? How do you monitor it? How do you troubleshoot it? how do you optimize it from an application infrastructure standpoint, any IT device in the environment? Again, this is one of the differentiations of STEP. This is really the foundation for our managed services, but we can build custom dashboards that you can run on your tablet, your phone, your desktop, and monitor and know what's going on in your network. And this also gives you a path with integration into ServiceNow. With that, I want to start with our first topic, and I'm going to ask Eugene and Dan to give their thoughts on it. You know, when you think about smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0, you know, they really go hand in hand. So understanding the key concepts of Industry 4.0, how is that revolutionizing the manufacturing landscape? You know, what are the opportunities that businesses are looking to unlock, you know, from a productivity and efficiency standpoint? You know, I want to go first to Eugene here. Eugene, obviously we're in a transformative era, and all of manufacturing is kind of leading the way as far as leveraging digital technologies to create smarter, more efficient and flexible operations. You know, what's your take on this when you're and again, I know you're involved with a lot of large customers and really all size customers, but you're at the forefront of this. What are customers looking to to solve for, and what does it mean to them?
Yeah, we're seeing all types of trends as it relates to Industry 4.0, all the way from, simple things around basic connectivity to reduce downtime, improve operational efficiency, employee worker safety, all the way up to different use cases of how can they get information right off these connected devices in their plants, to leverage, more things, like AI and others to help drive more operational efficiency within their environment. So what I would say is that you think about IoT and Internet of Things, it's all about, how do we get more out of these connected devices so that we can utilize the data from it to make better, planning decisions, within the different environments that we have. And manufacturers, whether they're automotive manufacturers, right, they're other, commercial manufacturers, right, around different products, et cetera. They're very, they're starting to look at, how can I take advantage of connectivity like, 5G, right, or even LTE, to help enable some of these different use cases and things that they have. For instance, it's not just about, can I connect the device, right? But it's about, the latency as well. Can I rely on that device to be connected for a period of time so I can get reliable data and things off of it? So we're seeing all types of concepts and things in the industry that are starting to, to drive the use, of these new networks and things that we're bringing to the table. And I know we'll talk a bit more about this as we get into the topic, but that's starting to revolutionize that manufacturing landscape from our perspective at Ericsson.
That makes sense. And by the way, I should introduce, Ericsson's the global leader in wireless technology. So when I think of Ericsson, I think of all the radio access networks, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all the global carriers, that are built on Ericsson radios. And a lot of what we're talking about today is bringing in that carrier grade wireless technology into the enterprise and how they can take advantage of the same reliability and performance and so forth. But let me throw it over to Dan. Dan, what are your thoughts as far as what customers are solving for and what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all the use cases that that Eugene just mentioned, but I mean, it's really about data collection for data-driven decisions, right? So whether the use case is IoT or AI or something else, it's heavy on the data collection piece. There's mobility elements that factor into that we see a great deal where, something like Wi-Fi might not be the best way to maintain that connectivity and keep everything flexible and seamless. Ultimately you want to drive these decisions based on data, regardless of use case. So it's same things that Eugene mentioned, but add all that data and modeling behind it for things like AI, those sort of things as well. So you want to make good decisions. You want to make them quickly. You want to be flexible, the ability to add on quickly, change processes quickly, and maintain that efficiency across, right? And then there's the people element to it as well, right? You have people who are more satisfied in their roles and what they're doing. They're making better decisions. They're making them faster. And I think that just keeps them happier in the workplace. So it all kind of just balls up together and feeds one another. You were going to say something?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll add on to, what Dan added. I think we're also starting to see, the device ecosystem, right? Starting to lend itself, more to, the manufacturing process, right? And getting more right out of your production, floors and plants. I mean, there's more and more devices that are within these plants. So the more devices you add, right? Now the more information I have, the more points of failure I have within the manufacturing facilities. This is, starting to drive the need, for different, solutions and uses as it relates to IoT. So we're starting to see that, also manufacturers want reliability. So they want to make sure, right, that whatever they put in place in terms of a technology, right, to help advance in these things that Dan and I just talked about, that system is going to be reliable, right, and stable. So they want to have things like stable latency. They want to have security, right, across the entire stack. And they want to be able to bolt and add onto this and still be able to depend on that reliability that we have in place.
Absolutely.
Great points. I'm going to transition to the next topic. I don't know if Katie and Katie, do we have any questions yet in the window?
No questions yet.
All right, we'll keep rolling. So the role of private 5G networks, and I'd like each of you kind of just to share, what is a private 5G network? What is a private cellular? What does that mean? I think everybody has a cell phone and understands, they've got service from one of the carriers. And, I think the important thing too is, when we talk about hybrid networks is the cell phone example, and Dan, you use this, is that you have in your hand, you're using an Android device or an iPhone. That in and of itself is a hybrid network because it can connect to 4G, 5G, private cellular. It has near technology. It has Bluetooth. So connectivity in a hybrid fashion and leveraging, cellular networks, it's really using what the carriers use and bringing it to the enterprise. But I'm going to turn it over to you two to give your perspective. Maybe start with Dan this time.
Yeah, thanks. Right after you took my greatest example.
I'm sorry, we're going to rewind and delete that portion again, but go ahead.
No, I mean, we're all used to this concept in our personal lives, right? We hold one right with us or near us all the time, right? And it is a hybrid network. I mean, we have all these different functions and capabilities, and it's really, to me, hybrid networking is about matching the right technology to the right problem, right? So just as that, we mentioned on the personal device, when we go and make a payment at a coffee shop, right? You want to use the near field communication. That's the right technology. You got to place your device on there to get the scan and pay. You don't want to broadcast that out, out over Wi-Fi and things like that as a guest in that area. If you're going to be, taking a video phone call with a loved one or something like that, right? You're going to use your phone. And the cellular technology to connect somebody across the world. I did it this morning with my daughter who lives over in the Netherlands. And then Wi-Fi. If I'm sitting at that same coffee shop where I made a payment earlier, I'm going to enjoy the Wi-Fi to, check in with news, check my emails at work, things like that. So I'm solving a whole different slew of problems using the right connectivity to do that, right? And it needs to operate seamlessly in an industrial environment, just like it does for us when we're using it personally. So if you have something, I keep going back to Wi-Fi because that's one of the biggest differences between that and private cellular or hybrid. Wi-Fi is not the greatest with mobility, but private cellular is. So you want, if you have a robot running around a factory, you want to collect that data, you want to give it information. It's autonomous. There's different things going on. It's got to feed the process. Those disconnects in Wi-Fi, that's just not matching the right technology to the right problem, right? You're going to have disconnects and things like that with your Wi-Fi, whereas using a private cellular network, you can overcome those issues. So you have the right technology at the right time in the right place. That's really how I see it. And you're not going to use Bluetooth to connect to something across the factory floor. You're going to use a different technology. Eugene, I don't know what you might have to add.
Yeah, I'll talk about it, in a couple of ways in terms of the benefits of what we call private cellular over Wi-Fi. When you first mentioned it, Ed, like you mentioned, a private network could be a combination of different things. A network slice is a private network, right? A private cellular network is a private network. Anytime I carve off a portion of the network, right, that's for independent use from what we actually call our public network, whether that's on our LAN or WAN, that becomes a private network. But when we get into private cellular, that's where we bring that unique capability, right? As you mentioned, of taking what, we traditionally offer within the, operator or mobile network operator space of having these SIM-enabled devices, whether it's our phones or other technology that we use, and now being able to take that and put that to other devices that can be a part of its own independent network from the operators. That's when we start getting into private cellular network. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the advantages that private cellular networks have over Wi-Fi is the ability to have predictive, latency. So one of the challenges that you have with Wi-Fi hotspots is sometimes you have dead zones and dead spots. So with a private cellular network, there's things like seamless mobility, right, that you can put in place like we do with enterprise, 5G, to allow you to not have these different dead spots and things that you have as a part of it. That also lends itself to more controlled performance. When you have ARs and VRs and things that are on a manufacturing floor, you now have more controlled performance around them. Scalability and capacity, right? The ability to add more capacity to your network to be able to support, the different device needs that you have on that network. That is also something, right, that is more flexible and upgradable when you're dealing with a private cellular network that we bring to the table. Using licensed and unlicensed spectrum, right? So the ability to take advantage, right, of that operator spectrum that you want to use for different types of connected devices. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that when you talk about your customer successes and wins about how we do that. That also lends itself well, right, to a private cellular network, as well as the ability to use unlicensed spectrum, right? So public access licenses and the ability to use things like CBRS as well, right, to create, your own independent network that you have. Using things like that allows for more security. So I mentioned that earlier, also. So, as we start to see more adoption with private cellular networks, and we're seeing that now, there's been this trend since 2021 to 2026, you'll start to see more device ecosystem capability. And you're starting to see the device ecosystem catch up, right, and being able to lend itself well to the use of these types of networks. I'll hand it back to you, Ed, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, no, I think the great thing here in the value point is it gives you tremendous flexibility. Again, it's a hybrid network. It's not an either or in these environments, and it's utilizing the best connectivity that's required for that service application or client. So you have that flexibility by implementing private cellular into these large environments you're all working with, and we all are from a customer standpoint. I'm going to go to the next slide here. All right. So identifying challenges, we talked a little bit about it's not an either or, it's a hybrid. But I think one of the important things too is it's not just private cellular, but there's solutions around neutral hosts or retransmission of the public carrier networks that are of tremendous value for these customers as well, and even running neutral hosts on top of private cellular. So I think understanding, the indoor outdoor aspects of that and overcoming legacy network limitations, and you guys touched on it, it's the right, Wi-Fi is fine for certain applications and connectivity requirements, but doesn't really work in a large expanse or where you have mobility and so forth, given the nature of the technology. But why don't you give your thoughts on what's on this slide, and maybe touch on DAS versus neutral host, but I'll flip it back around and start with you, Eugene.
Yeah, not a problem. So, I mean, you're hitting on an important topic, as we enter into these manufacturing facilities, right? Not only do they have a need for these connected devices that they want to enable, we talked about some of them, whether it's AMRs, right, or it's different torque tools, right, or they're doing asset inventory management, and they have drones for scanning, or they have zero devices. But in addition, right, they want to have public coverage within these facilities. And the reason why is around employee and worker safety. So a lot of them in the past have called upon different systems like, DAS or distributed antenna systems, to allow you to bring indoor coverage from the operators. Part of the challenge you have within this space with the legacy systems that the operators need to participate, in bringing, some level of signal source, right, with those systems when they were sold to these manufacturers in order for them to operate correctly, as well as the distributed antenna systems require a lot of, networking space and room in order to allow for these systems to work, as well as nodes that need to be, placed throughout your manufacturing facility. Some of the advantages to, technology that Ericsson's created that we brought to the table is that we now have, indoor coverage, solutions. We have one called Enterprise 5G coverage that actually allows you to bring, multi-operator connectivity, into these manufacturing facilities by deploying less infrastructure, right? Getting more capacity, more bandwidth, right? more capability, out of the network for the operators without having to, increase or maximize your investment depending on how large these facilities are. So what the square foot and things begin to look like. So we're able to create a more efficient way of bringing indoor coverage now into these different types of facilities so that, when it comes to employee worker safety, if people need to call 911 or they run into different challenges on the floor, they can address those challenges. A lot of liabilities, for manufacturers, right? When people who are working on these manufacturing floors, right, don't have access to appropriate coverage and things along those lines. So that's one important thing. And then when you take these, coverage systems, right, that are allowing you to have access to the public network, and you combine it with what you're doing on the private, you're now offering this whole seamless indoor experience, right? The ability for you to now have public, right, network for access to anything you need on that public network, but then you have a private network, right, that gives you access to your devices and things where you have confidential information and data that you want to secure and protect. I'll hand it over to you, Dan, and get your thoughts.
Yeah. And there's I always think of the people element when we're talking about this stuff as well. So Ed and Eugene, you guys mentioned the neutral host offering, right? And there's that satisfaction for the workers is great. So if you have somebody out there on the factory floor and we've increased the coverage in there, if they're worried about maybe they have a sick child or something like that, or a loved one in the hospital, that sort of thing, and that's what's on their mind, if they can send or get a quick text, I'm not saying take their focus away from the job entirely, but they can get an update that says, oh, the operation went okay, or something like that, or the fever broke for your kid. Those sort of things allow these people to put their minds back on the task at hand, right? And that satisfaction. But along with that, we've seen a lot of people use EP 5G as well as the public networks as they're in these environments for training purposes, for pulling down manuals to do actual maintenance quickly, right? So someone goes out, identifies a legacy piece of equipment. This before you might have had to go to I worked in semiconductor manufacturing, and we actually had microfiche to go back to look up manuals, different things like that for old pieces of gear that were still operating. Now, if you can pull that up on your phone or on your tablet, your Zebra tablet that you have, you can quickly dive into the problem. You can look at the expanded drawings, and you can be working. The satisfaction portion of that for folks, right? It's a whole lot less running around. You can get a lot more done. You can be much more efficient. You can go on to the next problem. So the efficiency is not always just in that measurable operational efficiency, but it's also in your workforce efficiency of what those people can do. Training people is if they have the right information at the right time, that's very important, especially if it's kind of OJT and things like that, right? They're down on the factory floor, or they're working with a piece of equipment. They can pull up some training documentation. We all on the weekends pull up YouTube to say, oh shoot, my lawnmower won't start. This is what I should check X, Y, Z, change a filter, whatever, right? We did that on our phone. We didn't have to run into the house, pull, dig out the manual, that sort of thing. So those efficiencies really increase. I mean, we still get all the other data-driven efficiencies as well, but there's that people side to it that I think we can't miss.
Yeah, absolutely on all that. I think what people I think take for granted that they can communicate, right? It's easy, but sometimes when you get into a industrial environment or manufacturing environment, and I think a lot of the customers, you guys have probably touched on this in the use cases, they're investing heavily in Industry 4.0 and robotics and mobility and all these next gen technologies. And when that stuff isn't working, it's a significant loss to the business, not just opportunity, but actual costs. And I know, what we've seen where we put in hybrid networks, and you guys will touch on this, huge impact to the people that work in the environment because the network just works. Right, everybody expects just to connect or to get that information, or Dan, you to figure out how you get your lawnmower going so you can cut your lawn. But when it's just a given as you walk into a building, you think, well, I can connect, but that's just not the case. And I think what happens is, and we'll touch on this on the next slide, is that if you do the surveys and you understand where the limitations are of the current network that you have, it may be where Wi-Fi is not designed properly, or just Wi-Fi doesn't work well in a large environment, whatever that might be. But what Eugene was talking about is that, look at the actual carrier coverage, the public carrier coverage. and AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon, are you getting a signal within the building or campus or facility? And I know we have a lot of customers who do quite a bit, and certainly healthcare does as well, where they do that on the public carrier network. So it's really solving multiple connectivity issues as you get into these environments and working back from what they're trying to connect. And we'll go on to the next slide. I think that plays into following on to this. Let me, go ahead, Eugene.
Before you move on to that next slide, I think you hit on something that was really important just around the investments, right, that these companies make, in their own, technologies and capabilities that's for their company. So for instance, when we talk about public coverage, it's more than just connecting, your cell phones and devices, right? So you can call home to your family, right? Or even just for 911. A lot of companies today are actually building their own applications internally, right? So they're making investment in cloud-based applications. They're encouraging, people to bring their own devices, to the facility. That cuts down on actual costs and things that they have, but they still need to have access, right, to these homegrown applications and things that were built. So a lot of them are deploying this type of technology, right? So indoor coverage, to allow for that type of connectivity. So we're starting to see a major demand and increase on that so they can maximize those investments and things that they put in place, around that. And the same thing goes for, our enterprise, private 5G, solution as well, to actually increase the level of operational and, efficiency within their, manufacturing environments. That requires an investment, right? In the types, technology, that they put in place. I think you mentioned something, before, like around anomaly, detection, so a lot of them are actually putting in, different systems around anomalies so that during the manufacturing, process, they can actually scan for product quality defects and things along those lines. And these networks, such as EP5G lend themselves well, right? Those types of use cases. And that, of course, helps increase the ROI, that they get on investing in these types of networks and ensuring, right, that they maximize the investments and things that they put in place.
Great input. Let me check real quick. Are there any questions in the chat window?
Yes, Ed, we do actually. We have a security question. Can you dive a little deeper on security with private cellular networks?
Who wants to take that one, Dan or Eugene?
I'll let you start off, Dan.
That's fine. Oh, I thought you said you were going to start off.
I was letting you go ahead, Dan. I was being a gentleman. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah. So basically, these private networks, as we set them up in your environment, right? It's a sub network or a different network altogether. So you are going to allow connectivity out to the internet, the world, but you're going to punch through one singular spot on the firewall. It's not like this is it's ubiquitous in coverage, but not each AP is going out on its own, right? So it's going to come back to essentially a controller or IRU and baseband when we're talking about EP5G. And from there, we're going to have a connection out to the internet. So if you want to interconnect, to a different facility, things like that, but it's separated. And then within the system itself, and Eugene alluded to it earlier, we have micro slicing, right, where we can slice a piece of this private network. We'll say for EH&S, this is your security cameras, things like that. Not everyone in the facility needs to have access and see directly into that information. So that'll be a separate network slice that's assigned via the SIM, and people will, they'll be able to see what they need to see. If you're someone in manufacturing, maybe somebody from EH&S doesn't need to see what you have going on in your manufacturing slice, right? It's not quite as meaningful to those folks as it is to you. So there's kind of those two components. You have that single point where you're going to go out, and then the devices themselves and the technology itself is cellular, right? So it's two-factor authentication kind of out of the box because it requires a SIM and a device. And it's going to be allowed onto that network via the SIM in the same way that your Verizon SIM isn't going to log you onto an AT&T network necessarily, right? Unless there's some sort of roaming agreement or something like that that's in place. So that's kind of the three areas that I look at. I'm not a security expert by any means, but that's kind of how it's segmented out and how you maintain that security. Eugene, I don't know what you have to add.
Yeah, no, you touched on it. I think you covered it well. I mean, this is an independent network, right? From your physical, local area network that you have in place within your, facility, and it is SIM enabled. So all the capabilities, security wise that we get, in a traditional, telecommunications, networking environment that we, deploy with our operators, we also reap those same benefits around security, right, when it comes to private networks as well. Meaning with your enterprise network management console, I think Ed touched on it earlier, the ability, right, for us to have one holistic control and view, around the devices, and information, right, that is connected via that private network. We have the ability, right, to control every device, right, that's connected to a network, and understanding what information is being accessed, through on it, right, what devices and things are on that network. We have full control and capability around that. So that increases, right, your capabilities when it comes to, providing the right types of security and protocols and things you need in place to ensure, right, that you're not having, inappropriate, use or behaviors, right, when it comes to, different assets and things that are accessing the network.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So actually implementing, private 5G or neutral host or any of these solutions we're talking about, what are the actual, like, what's the next? I've heard it. I'm interested. What are like next steps, or how does the process flow? Because I think, and maybe I'll go to you, Dan, first, is that, having done this for, several years now, I think we've got some best practices of kind of where we start getting floor plans and then the surveys and so forth, trying to ensure success. And then as you guys can talk to as well, I think even internally, as important as the infrastructure is in the plumbing, culturally, sometimes you got to work through some things. And we always say, with IT and OT and large manufacturing environments, sometimes you got to like bridge the gap in understanding of the value and benefits. And we act as marriage counselors sometimes, in these and doing the front end planning on these and looking at the use cases and prioritizing. That's as important as doing the surveys and getting the estimations on the front end. It's culturally, you have to be ready to implement, and that's for Industry 4.0 in general, but certainly from an infrastructure standpoint. But I'll stop there, and Dan, why don't you kind of talk through maybe best practices, and then Eugene, we'll go to you after.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, it's obviously with an engineering background, I want to start with a clear and understood problem statement. Usually when a customer engages with us, they're feeling pain somewhere in or maybe multiple areas, and we want to identify what those pains are, what they're trying to solve for, and what a positive outcome looks like, right? So that we can, somebody, sorry about that. So really it's that clear problem definition. And once we have that, then we know what we need to design for, right? We need, we'll move into those more tangible items like what areas do you need covered to solve that problem within your facility? So we want to look at floor plans and those sort of things so that we can start, thinking along the lines of designing a system that's going to cover the area that's needed and perform the way you need it to perform within that area. So we'll take those floor plans in. We'll start on our side doing preliminary models, taking some educated guesses where we might place things. But there's typically a lot of back and forth at that point with the customer. We want to understand their different input. We want to present them with some of the, I wouldn't say limitations, but the way the technology works and how it needs to be implemented within their space to meet the needs to cover the problem statement, right? Once we have that, we definitely want to get out on site. We want to get eyes on, do some measurements in the environment, understand what their environment's doing to some of the RF so that we can take that preliminary model and solidify it, make sure that all our assumptions, as we were looking through very often, especially within manufacturing environments, different things like that, there's a piece of equipment or lots of pieces of equipment that may not be on the drawings. Maybe some of the measurements are slightly off, or maybe something, we need to even understand the elevations from floor to ceiling in order to properly design for these spaces. So a lot of things can be seen there. We want to look at cabling paths. We want to know distances. All those sort of things will be defined so that we can come up with good pricing and that can take us to implementation from that point. And then once we actually go into a construction phase and we get that cabling in place, we get the APs up, we get the controllers, the basebands, IRUs, and all those sort of things in the rack. We'll go out and validate that system, measure it, and those sort of things. So that's kind of the process, and then we can optimize after it's in as well. So as things change, maybe a bunch of new equipment came in, maybe we're adopting a new use case in the future, things like that. These are dynamic. Everyone drives by the same factory all the time. It looks the same, but when you go into these places, they're very dynamic environments. There's constant changes, new equipment coming in, things like that. So we'll want to periodically optimize those. And then as well, we can offer all the way down to monitoring services and things like that, where we can watch that network, let you know about problems that are coming up, and things that we're seeing on there, let you know when it's time to optimize, be prepared for different pieces of equipment coming in, and even some of the administration of the network, how to slice that up most efficiently for what you guys are doing in your environment. They're all fairly the same, but they're all custom at the same time, right? It's kind of like Wi-Fi. We use the same technology everywhere. Everyone knows how Wi-Fi goes, but it's custom within each of those environments, how it's used and where it's placed and all those sort of things. Eugene? I think we lost audio there, or at least I have.
All right, I'll stop talking.
There we go. There we go.
So as I was saying, I think you actually covered it quite well and hit on some of the key topics. I think understanding your environment, is super important. So, initially up front, before you begin your design, of your private network, you understand, all the things that are about your environment. So in terms of the amount of clutter, right? A lot of these manufacturing facilities, have a lot of metal, and steel throughout of them. All this plays a role, within the coverage that you're going to be able to get within these facilities, is right, as well as being able to maximize the capacity, from, the radios and devices, right, that you have within it that need to have access, to the network, to be able to download and upload, information. So, understanding that environment is key, and then being able to put together an optimal design that fits your environment is key. We deploy our network solutions, in a lot of different types of operational technology or OT environments. So you may be dealing, with places where there's a lot of, heat, right, within certain areas, and proper placement, of the radios, are key, depending on where that heat dissipation, and things is. You may be dealing, with different floors where you may need different types of radio coverage. It may not be an open wide, space. So having access to, a radio dot to be able to place in different locations, right, may be able to give you the proper pinpointed coverage that you need in different areas, right, versus having, maybe an outdoor radio like our 4408 that'll blast across the factory floor. All that's going to just be dependent, on the environment. So I think we're, covering it quite well, that you gotta, up front, understand, what's in that facility, and doing a proper site walk is the way to do that. So you need to have people, other than just a floor plan, to go out and walk that site and really understand what's in it, right? And how do you take those things into consideration for your design? And once you have that, all done, then that leads you into being able to determine, what assets do you need for that network. So putting together a proper bill of materials and understanding what it is that you're going to purchase and you're going to be consume at that time. And then, of course, getting ready, right, for the deployment and the implementation, and as, Steph alluded to, so Dan was talking about, there's different types of services that we offer as a part of the solution, but there's also different services as a part of our partnership relationship that we can give you around being able to manage and monitor your network, as well. So I think those are some of the key things that you want to think about in order to be able to get started, as well as, how can we help you, manage and optimize all the capabilities you can of that network once you have it in place.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead. Well, no, I mean, the other thing is what I've really noticed in our partnership with Ericsson is that these are very tough environments, and if they are designed correctly, these are very robust networks with very little downtime. I'm not saying that there can't be an issue that occurs. I mean, we've lost dots due to water damage at facilities, things like that. But in the same way that we kind of take for granted our cell phones as we're out in the world driving around. I mean, we know what the dead spots are if they're on the way to work, things like that. These things are very robust networks, and they become really a part of that environment if we implement them correctly. And a lot of it, is taking that time to understand the problem domain correctly up front, understand that facility or that environment very, very clearly, and we can build a very, very robust capable network that people kind of start taking for granted, and even add to use cases. So I think that the difficulty is not difficulty, but just as things evolve, right? We want to maintain some level of partnership closely with the customer, so we understand changes that are occurring after deployment, things like that, so that we can continually optimize and keep that kind of taken for granted network performing in the way that everyone expects. So that post deployment is key as well, right? The more we understand after it's up and running and changes are coming to that environment, the more we can help keep everything kind of running ubiquitously as it did day one, right? That's really our goal.
Great points. And again, I think you both touched on it, and certainly Eugene, you mentioned, is that this is a strong partnership, and obviously we're bringing best in class carrier grade technology to the enterprise with our partners Ericsson. But what makes STEP different in our value add in this is that we're not just looking at it as selling you a private cellular or neutral host solution. On the front end, we're looking at the whole network environment. So we can do an assessment audit on your traditional wired and Wi-Fi network, and then we can do it on the RF side as well, just to understand the complete environment, because a hybrid network integrates the cellular technologies with the traditional networking, Wi-Fi and wired, but also wrapping with security. So our goal is to give you an end-to-end view of what it looks like integrated with your traditional network, and then the monitoring and management tools post-deployment allow you to have proper visibility, and we can meet you where you are from a capability standpoint. So that's a differentiation from STEP versus other partners and so forth that we work with, obviously closely Ericsson on that. Next slide, I'm just going to go and really this is kind of I believe our closing slide is, and you guys did a great job touching on a lot of different aspects of how customers are deploying the solutions and some of the benefits they're seeing. But any particular success stories that either Eugene, you or Dan want to highlight? Maybe we'll go to Eugene first on this, that who's deploying this, because a lot of times you hear the acronyms, you hear the terms, but are folks really deploying it? And there's a lot, and actually we're seeing this really accelerate in the marketplace, and manufacturing, warehouse, and logistics is really leading the way, and then other vertical segments are right behind it. But I'll let you guys maybe talk about anything you want to talk about on customer success stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a huge one, together, definitely public. So anybody who wants to go out and Google it, with Toyota Materials Handling. So Toyota Materials Handling, right, was looking to bring indoor coverage into their facility for an interesting reason. They actually have these forklifts, right, that can operate in an autonomous fashion. And they have telematics devices that are within them, and they wanted to be able to test those telematic devices as a part of those forklifts, and needed access to the public network, and actually wanted to bring coverage in the facility to allow for that testing. So you think about that. That was a way to actually leverage, right, something that's traditionally used to bring, public cellular coverage right into facility to allow them, to take other advantage, of a public network for other types of things, right, like testing, right, of those telematic systems with their forklifts, as well as they reap the benefits of being able to bring in indoor coverage for the facility. So then, in addition to that, Toyota Materials Handling, also as a part of their manufacturing plants, they were actually losing, I think Ed touched on this, at a high level, these factories lose quite a bit of money every, minute, that they are down, so every minute that they are down, right, the clock starts ticking and the dollars start ticking if they can't get back up. And they had Wi-Fi in their facility, and Wi-Fi is good, right, for certain use cases, but in some of the, challenges that they were having on the plant floor, they were losing, connectivity, and it was impacting, right, certain portions of their manufacturing process. So by implementing our EP5G solution, they were able, right, to minimize, that downtime, so that they didn't, have this impact, right, to the business, and increase overall, operational efficiency and productivity. So that was a huge win for us. And they started off with one plant, right, and expanded it out through, the rest of their plant floors and shop floors. But maybe Dan, I'll let you add on to that. We had a good win there and good success there.
Yeah, so I guess at that facility, manufacturing forklifts. They do their R&D and all those things that Eugene just mentioned, but specifically they're also serve as the warehouse and main distribution for all of North America, all the parts for repairs, things like that. So 1 in 5 parts that they manufacture and warehouse at that facility, and really it's a logistics center, right? They're sending out 1 in 5 parts are for their actual manufacturing process, and then the other 4 parts will go out across the country in North America to different dealerships, things like that, shops that are maintaining equipment. So their warehouse at that facility is extremely important to the logistics operation as a whole. And in that space, they had a Wi-Fi network where workers, go around and they do their picking and different things like that, based off some Zebra tablets. And they were having a lot of disconnect issues within that environment. Very, very large warehouse, couple 100,000 square feet, and those disconnects can cost these workers up to 20 minutes of downtime as they go into this reconnect state. They get logged back into these different ARP systems and all this. It took a tremendous amount of time. We were able to go in there. So there were about 40 Wi-Fi APs that they tried to cover the area. They could not saturate it correctly with Wi-Fi. We actually dropped in with some Ericsson micro cells, same thing that you might see at the mall or at an airport, things like that, to distribute coverage. These are outdoor devices. We detuned them. Ericsson helped us a great deal, and we were able, with 2 of those devices, to cover the entire warehouse, saturate the environment with signal, and have literally no drops anymore. So that translated into 50% less overtime for those workers. A huge satisfaction. These people could actually have lives, commit to picking their kids up after school, things like that they weren't able to do before. And then again, any downtime holistically, right, in that area we functionally covered, and that was over $100,000 a minute if they were down. So a big win in that space, and that was seen immediately within the first month. We reaped all those benefits, and they loved it, and they've continued to be a great customer and continue to expand in that environment. So happy to answer any questions around that and what we did there, as well as any others that people may have.
Yeah, maybe I'll highlight one more success story, but it's not public, so I won't mention the customer's name. But we also have a joint win and success of a large automotive manufacturer. We're seeing a trend within automotive manufacturing, right? A lot of companies are seeing the benefits of implementing and deploying private networks as well as public cellular within their environments. And what was interesting about this joint win we had together is that this facility had an employee and worker safety situation where they wanted to implement a public network. We're looking for us to actually deploy that within their storm shelters together. And now that's led to us actually looking at public, coverage, cellular coverage right across their entire factory floor, as well as they had different, use cases internally, right, as a part of their manufacturing process, for a private network. And we've now deployed a private network as a part of their environment and facility, as well. So, just I think the partnership that we had together with Ericsson and STEP, has lent itself, greatly, right, to understanding these unique environments that you're seeing within the manufacturing, area, and then how we can jointly solve them together. So, a lot of, joint opportunity for collaborative services and things that we can bring to the table, also. But as I mentioned, the automotive industry is beginning to really pick up. A lot of companies that are traditional automotive manufacturing are now getting into EV manufacturing as well. And we're starting to see, as I said, the complexity around those environments begin to increase, and they're also looking to figure out how they adopt, private, networks, right, as a part of their manufacturing process.
Yeah, and that last one that Eugene was mentioning there, that's it's really implementing their factory of the future right now, and that the win with the neutral host enabled us to go in there and help them solve for that futuristic view via EP 5G, and that is kind of the main thread in comms for them to give them the ability to move into these different spaces that they were unable to solve for previously. And it's all the things that we talked about today: the efficiencies, the AI, the data collection, the robotics, the AGVs, all those sort of things. So that's a very unique win for us.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we have a lot of momentum, right? And we have two of the biggest auto manufacturing companies on the planet we're deploying in. And one thing I thought was interesting is the head of North America digital transformation on the one, said that, morale's not great, right? I mean, we've got connectivity all over the issues all over the place. And then after deploying the hybrid network and turning it on, so forth and whatnot, seeing that drop in overtime hours, and then all of a sudden morale is up, right? I didn't know how you might measure that, right? And they actually said, I think it's important for every customer and that's where we start is, where are you having problems with connectivity today? And again, our differentiation is we don't assume anything. Let's go out, do the surveys, we'll do the audits. Let's look at the traditional network and what's happening. And then where do you have RF signal, or where do you have gaps? And then put a comprehensive plan together to solve for that. And what are you trying to unlock or enable from an Industry 4.0 standpoint? And what are the priorities? These use cases where you got AMRs, AGVs, you got robotics, in order of priority, what are you trying to enable? Because when the network just works and it's invisible, now you've enabled all of the things that you're trying to do from an Industry 4.0 standpoint. Those investments are optimized. Now you add more and more use cases. That's what we're seeing. We take away the pain and the downtime, but we really enable all these next generation use cases around Industry 4.0. And quite honestly, a lot of folks just don't know that you can leverage cellular technologies or carrier grade, wireless technologies from Ericsson. That's what we're out and educating and talking to customers about. And we're sharing these best practices. So we would love to continue this conversation, and super appreciate, Eugene, you participating today. It's great working with you. We have a unbelievably strong partnership. Again, carrier grade networking, wireless technology we're bringing to enterprise with Ericsson, building on their solution portfolio, adding value to it, monitoring management and so forth. And Dan, all the work you're doing with the mobility practice here at STEP. So I want to thank you for participating as well. The two Katies, do we have any other questions before we conclude here today? Is there any other questions in the chat?
Nope, we are clear. It looks like you guys answered all the questions.
We are cleared for landing. I saw Todd Kelly, our CTO, has joined. I see his picture there. I don't know if he wants to add any comments or if anyone else has any final thoughts they want to share here. I think this has been a wonderful exchange of ideas and information. We would like to continue the conversation with the customers who attended today. We'll send out a survey, and how you can contact us for additional info. But we appreciate everybody's time. I'll open it up. Dan or Eugene, anything else you want to close with?
Yeah, no.
Go ahead, Eugene. You started. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, no, I appreciate just the time, everybody, to join the webinar, and, also the partnership, like I said, that we've had with STEP here, over the years, to help unlock some of these new, opportunities and use cases we're seeing in the market. What I'll tell you now is that, private networks is not seen as just an emerging, market and technology anymore. It's starting to become a standard. So we've really seen, over the past, year and a half, it really begin to come into its own as, manufacturers, right, and other types of customers realize the return on the investment they get in implementing these types of networks, right, and the impact it has on their, environment. So, just wanted to end on that. And, if you are looking for any more information, right, around our enterprise 5G products or our Ericsson indoor, coverage solutions, we can share those, with you, through reaching out to STEP. We can get you all the information that you need.
Yeah, well said. Same sort of thing, right? If folks, I appreciate everyone's time today and joining. And if you're anything like me, a lot of questions come after the fact. So we're easy to get a hold of. We're all passionate about this technology. So reach out, and love to have a chat with you. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, we'll conclude today's session, and thank you for attending.
Thank you.